You know what's really dumb? Chronic sinus infections. You know what makes it even more dumb? Chronic sinus infections in July. As you probably guessed, I have a sinus infection, and I do get them chronically. Remember how I've been sick for like a month, right? You know, you've been hearing all these profound things backed up by this seal randomly barking. Well, it's not over. Just when you think it's almost over, it's not over. About 90% of the time that I get a cold, a sinus infection will follow. And it's especially dumb right now because it's summer in Minnesota. I feel very cheated out of summer, right? Like, we have a literal season called cold and flu season in Minnesota. And it's basically like October through January, right? It's when hell freezes over literally and it's just winter here. And I'm supposed to get sick in the summer. But I've basically had a cold all summer. And it's turned into a sinus infection. And, you know, like, I've got an appointment to see an actual doctor at this point because of how many sinus infections I get as a result of colds. And hopefully they can give me some advice, but come up with some solutions for me. So it's in the works. I'm working on it. But in the meantime, unfortunately, you are going to hear a very congested, occasionally coughing, very bitter person on this podcast today, because the last thing I want is a sinus infection in July. Now, although I thought that was important for you to know, it is not the focus of today's episode. Today's focus is on something even more dumb, which is a trauma cycle. And that's not an officially coined psychological term by any means. It's just what I'm calling the experience that I've kind of been in, as well as the experiences that are breaking me out of it. So today's episode is all about when you are stuck in kind of a trauma loop, reliving things that you wish you weren't reliving all the feelings you think you need to have to protect yourself, and just sort of being stuck there. And some suggestions that I have for just how to kind of get out of that, how to lift the weight a little bit, as they say. And I'm going to get very candid and very vulnerable with you because there's some very real reasons why I'm currently in this sort of trauma loop right now. In the middle of July, right? Like I said, summer is my favorite season. I am just trying to enjoy the best time of year in this stupid state where it's winter 9 months a year, you know? Like, summer is my time. I'm loving it. But so far, I feel a little bit betrayed by summer. So, let me get into it. I wanted this to be Nightmares in Circles Part 2 because I found that some similar themes with some new realizations were kind of coming to me. So instead of talking about my nighttime nightmares, although I will bring those up because, you know, the consciousness is all connected, what we think during the day, what we do think at night, it's all a part of our vast divine being, so I'll refer to the nightmares, but it's more like a living nightmare, and how, again, the concept of circles is sort of saved me. So this is the part where I am going to be very candid and very vulnerable with you about some specifics. You know, I debated about whether I even wanted to speak publicly about this, but I think I need to. I don't think I can tell this story as well as the solution unless I'm just brutally honest with you. And it's like, you know, this has haunted me so much, like I might as well just talk about it. You know, what's the point? Like, it's already flooded my thoughts. Why not share that with you for healing purposes? So let me get down to it. As you probably might have guessed, this trauma loop has been all about the infamous character that has come up on this podcast a couple times, and that is my husband's ex-wife. I have been in a trauma loop when it comes to thinking about her, and this is where I want you to know you're not alone in healing. If you're trying to forget someone or move on from someone who's caused you harm and you just feel like, you know, bogged down by, like, you think you're making progress, but they keep haunting you. This is what progress and healing is. When you're dealing with really evil, vile energies and the person's not dead or completely cut off from you, you kind of are at war. It's a daily thing. And you're never you're never give up on yourself, because there's layers to trauma, there's layers to evil. And just because you have a hard time or you get stuck in something doesn't mean that you aren't still healing. That just is what healing is. And eventually you do get to a place where you are kind of free from that person and free from the memories, and you build such a strong life that you're the oak tree and they're the straw, right? And I'm on that path. But it's just that. It's a path. And here's why I'm really struggling right now. So if you've listened to previous episodes, you know that she abused my husband for years, both physically and emotionally, and continued that even into my relationship with him. Constant threats, withholding his kids from him. I mean, anything you can name that an abuser would do, she did it. She threatened me too. Would contact me when I asked her not to, looked up my parents' address, looked up my work address, threatened to stalk me, would take pictures of my social media and send it to my husband and say, if you don't, XYZ, whatever it is that she wanted from him, I'm going to contact her. And she would literally count down, about when she was going to do what she was going to do. And as many of you also know, she physically attacked him at my home. With my children and her joint children with my husband inside. She tried to force her way into our house and physically hit my husband over and over again when he tried to keep her out, and I called the police. This was a very traumatic event, and the really shitty thing is that it happened at my home. Your home is supposed to be your safe space. And her actions made my home not a safe space for me or my kids for a long time. And so because of her actions, we've had to clean up the mess of making our home feel like a safe place again. Now, this attack happened on August 2nd, 2022. And as a result of this attack, plus her threats to stalk me and all of that, I was able to get a restraining order against her, right? And a restraining order is just what it sounds like, right? She is restrained from me. She's not allowed to contact me in any way, shape, or form, or to come within 2 blocks of my house. My husband has a similar legal document against her. But unfortunately, her restraining orders are only good for 2 years, and mine is about to expire. And the last thing I want this woman to do is to contact me, right? So then, and this is why we live inside a system that really doesn't serve victims. So then it becomes my responsibility to put the legal protection in place to protect myself again. Obviously, I don't want it to expire. There's nothing about her that has grown or changed or indicated that she is going to stop her abusive and threatening behavior. I don't want this to expire. I want like a lifetime restraining order. But unfortunately, it is going to expire. And I have to take steps to see if I can renew it or extend it. But those steps aren't easy. You're following government websites that are very convoluted and confusing and designed to prevent you from actually talking to them. It's designed to keep the offices not busy. And I filled out some of the wrong forms when I was trying to extend it because I misunderstood some things, and then ended up on the phone with somebody who was very rude and not helpful and kept telling me that she can't give me legal advice. And I wasn't asking her for legal advice. I was asking her how to use her system. I was like, ma'am, I don't need legal advice. I know I want to extend this. Okay? I've made that decision. What I need is help navigating your website so I can file the correct forms to start that process. All of this is very triggering because you have to type out your reasons why you're still afraid, why you still think you need a restraining order. And that involves typing up, once again, the incident that happened. That involves typing up the fact that my children still feel afraid that she'll come back to the house, how they were traumatized, and the mental impacts that had on them following it. The impact that it still has on me. Again, because it happened in my home. How I feel when I see certain taillights, headlights, hear certain bangs, things like that. Because she banged really hard on our door when she was trying to force her way in. And all of this gets dug up just so that I can protect myself again. The perpetrator doesn't have to do anything, right? The person who did this to me doesn't even have to think about it anymore, right? She just had to not contact me. That was it. But I, the victim, have to go through this whole process just to protect myself again. And it's very triggering. And we're in July, right? This incident of her attacking my husband and trying to get into my home happened in August. So that's unfortunately how trauma works. Your body remembers the time and the season that something happened. Maybe you can relate with some of the really shitty times of your life. Like maybe you hate the Thanksgiving holiday because something really traumatic happened then. Maybe you don't like lakes because something really traumatic happened on a lake. Maybe just whatever it is, our bodies remember the season and the environment where trauma happened. So naturally, unfortunately, as soon as summer hits, I feel myself like we're getting midway through summer, right? I'm getting within 3-4 weeks of when this attack happened a couple of years ago. And I feel my body getting tense. I feel myself thinking about her more, worrying about the what ifs, what will trigger a reaction. Because that's unfortunately how victims feel with abusers or people who've caused them trauma, is what is going to trigger their next blow up? And how can I prepare myself for it? So in your head, you start projecting every scenario that might lead to them potentially blowing up and doing something rash and attacking you or someone you love again. And then you plan in your head how you're going to protect yourself and those you love. And your mind is always trying to protect you, right? And to conserve energy doing so. And the ironic thing is you use a lot of energy imagining how you're going to keep this person away. And it all becomes just really upsetting. And if you're like me too, you feel it in your stomach. I feel physically sick. And to get even more candid, I have to go to the bathroom a lot, when I get stressed out like this. So I feel it in my body. I'm stressed and I'm tense. And it's all this combination of victims having to re-trigger themselves just to protect themselves, but also just our bodies remembering the seasons and the times that traumatic things happened, and without our even conscious awareness, start reacting to that. And you just feel more tense and on edge. And then the shitty thing about me, I guess it's a good thing, but the shitty thing is I do have an active mind. So every time that I spend time talking about her, chances are I'm going to have an actual nightmare about her that night. And sure enough, the day that I had to fill out all this paperwork trying to extend this harassment order, I had a nightmare about her. That's just how it works. And it sucks. And so I found myself over the last few days just kind of caught in this loop of thinking about her. And here's what I think about when it comes to her. And maybe you can relate if there's anybody who's ever been hell-bent on destroying you. I think about, part of it is just remembering what happened, part of it is just thinking about, God, the nerve, like it's just spiraling about how dare you, how dare you, how dare you. And then trying to piece together, the mind of a narcissist and of the mind of an abusive narcissist and why they would do this. And again, obsessing about what if she does it again? What if she does something similar? What am I going to do this time to make sure everybody is safe? And then you just add in, trying to make sure she doesn't have any access to any of my information and just all this stuff. So it's everything from obsessing about the nerve of a person like this to how am I going to protect myself and those I love if it happens again, to just God, like what justice could actually be served in a situation like this? What should justice look like? Because that's the other thing. I think we all know that much of our justice system is very unjust, right? And victims are not taken care of appropriately. If anything, I would argue, not just because of this situation, but because of others, it's more designed to protect perpetrators. And what I mean by that is there's multiple opportunities for perpetrators to quote unquote follow rules or take these classes or, only be in jail for a night and then get released till they're hearing. It's just a very broken system. And, I heard like sitting in court at her criminal sentencing, which is public, there's multiple families and people there. Like I sat in the court listening to other victim impact statements of this woman who was heartbroken because her brother was murdered by a guy who had murdered somebody else a few days before but was released on bail. And while he was released on bail, he went and murdered someone else. It's such a mess. You know what I mean? So there's this overarching theme when I'm thinking about her of like just how much I want to make the world better for victims, to protect victims, you know, to not have to have a world where victims re-trigger themselves or are forced to re-trigger themselves just to protect themselves. So here I've been in this loop. And again, the shitty thing is it happened in my home. So I'm at my home. I've just been home a lot the last few days, kind of just cycling it, obsessively trying to make sure I do feel safe in my home, going through the whole thing. And I have to say I'm very proud of myself, and I give myself a lot of grace for getting caught up in it, because of course that's what's going to happen. And the reality is, unfortunately, she's still involved, you know, in our lives, however distantly, you know, because of the connection we have to her with my stepdaughters. And so it's also just being worried about them and how they're being treated and trying to protect them. And so it's this constant loop of worry. And so I'm proud of myself because it's like I have gotten better over time at recognizing when I'm in this trauma loop and trying to actively step away from it, to honor the time that I need to talk about it, but then to step away, to just go outside, you know, to write about it, to acknowledge the fear that I feel, to speak about the injustice of the situation so I can hear out loud that it's not in my head that there's a lot of injustice for victims, but that there actually is a lot of injustice for victims and it needs to get better. And then I'm going to make sure it gets better when I have the resources to do so. I want to honor that this is a really hard and a really evil thing. And to reference my mistakes episode, it's energy, okay? When you have an evil person like her, or like anybody who you know who's an abuser or just a vile person who takes pleasure in causing others pain, they give off an energy, especially if they're connected to dark forces. So you are also dealing with their energy. It's a real thing. And so I try to honor that too, knowing, okay, this isn't just me and my feelings, like this is her energy. This is her energy that she's probably still sending toward us now, and the aftermath of what she's done. It's a real thing. So I try to give myself grace, and that it's like, hey, you are literally at war dealing with all of these things. And I try to honor the fact that I've made art out of it, that I get stuck in these loops, but I've made art. I've protected my family. I have helped my family feel safe in my home again when they didn't. You know, I've worked towards doing that. And the way that I did it is I went to EMDR therapy and I learned how to change the narrative from I am in danger to I create safety, where I instead focused on all the ways that I kept her out and kept my family safe, and all the ways that I've made a safe home even apart from her. Okay, so acknowledging all the things that I've done to recover from this helps. But at the end of the day, it is a living nightmare. It is a living nightmare, and it's very hard to break out of these trauma loops. It's very hard to break out of the trauma loop. And especially because it happened to my husband too. We went through it together. So we could talk about it for hours, how it made us feel, how we feel now, what we wish would have happened, what we wish would happen now, hours and hours and hours. So when you go through something traumatic with other people, you can lose yourself in conversation over it because it's frankly kind of addictive. You got all the chemicals in your brain going, and your brain wants to protect you. And so you continue to think, okay, the more I talk about it, the more I'll protect myself, the more we'll protect each other, the more that we'll just know what to do, the more that we can give ourselves the justice we didn't get. And then you're just in this cycle. So I honor the ways that I have made safety and that I am aware of what's going on. But sometimes, and this is what I learned, today, Sometimes solutions can be found in circles. There's a power in connection that can really break you out of it. And here's where I'm going to get specific about the positive things. So I'm in this living nightmare, right? Stuck in my house. And today I had 2 separate events with these writing groups that I'm a part of. You all know I love to write, and I'm a part of some writers groups in my area. It's how I've met some really, really lovely people like Varla Ventura and like my dear friend Amelia, who I interviewed. Amelia and Varla are 2 very powerful, beautiful people who give off their own light energy into this world. They are people who use the knowledge and experience that they have to remind the world that magic still exists, but also to break toxic cycles. And in the afternoon, I was in this indoor writers group where people are sharing their work, and where the writing teacher will give us prompts and have us respond to the prompts. And it could be anything from something like a phrase like, the last time I saw, and then you fill in the blanks, to an actual topic or a word like butterflies. So it's any kind of prompt, and we spend some time writing about it, and then we have sharing time where we can either share what we wrote to the prompt, or we can bring our own writing and share it. So it's this very supportive, kind of cohesive group. And the one I was in the afternoon, excuse me, I wrote my own poem about nothing having to do with my trauma. I wrote a poem in response to the prompt that was about heaven. And I started writing about heaven, which was really, really cool. And I got to listen to people share their stories. And it's everything from their heritage to their dating experience in college to finding letters that were written by their grandfather and trying to preserve them or put them into some kind of, collective journal, to someone who wrote about the chocolate chip cookies that he used to bake for the neighbor girl who became a part of the family. And the guy actually brought chocolate chip cookies to the group, which was fantastic. But we're all sitting in a circle, writing together, sharing together. I'm sitting next to my friend, and just being next to my friend was just a breath of fresh air. I was physically out of my house. I was in this place where art is made. We're not just writers, but all kinds of artists gather. Painters, ceramics artists, digital. It's an art center. So I'm in this place where the energy is art and creation, and I'm sitting next to people who are finding pure joy in language, pure joy in the stories of their family and the stories that they have to tell. And I'm listening, and I'm creating my own, and it just snapped me out of this trauma cycle. I was in a circle. I was listening. I was facing people. And you probably don't have to guess, nobody is on their phone. It's kind of like a unwritten, rule. You don't go on your phone when people are being vulnerable and sharing their writing. So you have people whose attention is 100% focused on each other. People who've created an environment where they feel safe enough to read their writing, to write more, to listen, to comment, to understand. The shape of circles is incredibly powerful. I've talked about that in my previous episode. Circles are equalizing. Circles help us actively listen naturally because we're all facing each other. We feel connected. I had this profound thought of when you see an action movie and people are being attacked, often they're in a circle, right? But they're facing outward. It's like this human thing that we do to feel protected, right? Like if you're in danger, and you're with people, you all turn into circles so you can see your enemy on all sides. But what about when we feel safe and we turn around and we're in a circle where we're looking at each other? It's so powerful, and the shape itself just creates a connection, right? Because a circle, it goes round and round. Everybody's connected at an equal level, and it's infinite. There's real power in the shape of a circle in that it's infinite. It doesn't end. It naturally tells us as human beings we are connected. We are infinitely connected. This kind of powerful, vulnerable, creative, safe, joyful space never ends. We can make it so it never ends. I bet you didn't know that's why you learned about shapes when you were that young. I'm actually being serious. Circles. It's a lesson that we need to learn from a young age. A circle is where we find our power and joy and connection. And even just sitting in one can snap us out of some of the worst trauma. I was in a circle, I didn't have my phone, fully focused on the people I was with, feeling their energy. Because also when you're in a circle, everybody's energy is connected too. You're all pointed at each other. And then the really beautiful thing is it's summer, so we also, another group taught by the same teacher, met outside. And it's a similar kind of idea, only we're getting inspiration from nature. And guess what? We sat in a circle outside too. We sat in this beautiful circle on the pavement of this art center, surrounded by a setting sun that's like resting and glowing on our shoulders. And there's black-eyed Susans, which are these really pretty like golden flowers growing everywhere, other wildflowers growing everywhere, butterflies flapping in the field, and fawns. Okay, fawns literally came out of the woods like these magical creatures. How often do you see a fawn, which by the way is a baby deer? You don't see baby deer. That's not a thing. I live in Minnesota. We see deer all the time. You don't see baby ones. I've seen a baby deer in the wild once. Besides today, 2 fawns came out of the woods and were just hanging with us. And the monarch butterflies, and the black-eyed Susans, and the setting sun. As this group of writers is sitting outside, bearing their souls, writing about the moon, learning from each other. That is magic. That is connection. It's the power of circles. And what it did for me is it shifted the focus from this trauma cycle of what this person has done and what I have to do to protect myself from this person. It shifted it back to what I'm doing and what people with positive creative energies are doing. And I promise you, it can push out the shadows. It can break you out of it. Being around creative, joyful, connected energy can break you out of trauma cycles. It can snap your brain out of it. Because the number one way to heal from any kind of trauma or any kind of evil that another has inflicted on you is to focus on what you are doing. What are you doing both with that trauma, but also what are you doing with your life to create a world that's full of joy and peace and connection? Focusing on the control that you have over the world that you're building is everything that can break you out of those cycles and everything that reminds you that there's more in this world. It broke me out of this loop and reminded me that, hey, look at everything I've done. Look at what I can create. Look at these people who are here creating and connecting despite the chaos around them. Look at these little fawns who feel safe enough with our energy to just come out of the woods and hang out. They were seriously there for like a half an hour, just hanging out by our circle. That doesn't happen, you know? So here's my point. Number one, you're not alone if you're feeling like you're stuck in a trauma cycle. Give yourself some grace, okay? You are super brave, and you've had to deal with some shit that you didn't cause, and you're a survivor. You deserve for that to be acknowledged, that you're a survivor. You protected yourself, and you protected people you love, and you made it out. That in itself is an incredible victory. And if nobody's ever told you that before, I'm telling you now. You survived. You protected yourself. You are incredibly brave and resilient. What happened to you shouldn't have happened to you. But you survived because of who you are. The second thing that I want to share with you is that one of the most powerful ways to break out if you just feel like you're stuck is to literally step out of it for a minute. Surround yourself with people who are creating. This is why a group is so important. I know that you all live in different places, but you can find art pretty much anywhere. And once you start looking for something that brings joy and creativity, you will find it. You can chalk it up to your spirit guides helping you out, leading you to excuse me, I'm sorry, leading you to creative environments and joyful environments. You can look at it that way. You can also chalk it up to science and your reticular activating system, right? Where you look for the things that your mind wants to find, right? So like if you've got butterflies on your mind, I think about butterflies a lot because, the symbolism of a cocoon and emerging from the cocoon and transformation, new beginnings. I see them everywhere now because I'm constantly looking for symbols of new beginnings. If you are looking for a group that centers on creativity, joy, and connection, your mind will help you find it. You'll notice something you didn't notice before. So if you're sitting here thinking, Jenna, I don't have an art center near my house, or I don't have a group near my house, you do. You have something. There are creative, joyful people everywhere, and the more that you tell yourself, okay, find creativity and connection today, the more that you will start to notice these opportunities. This art center was by I lived near it for 7 years, and I only really noticed it in the last year because I wasn't really looking for it until the last year. So that was 6 years of my life that this place was basically in my backyard. I had driven by it multiple times, but I wasn't looking for it, so I didn't see it. I encourage you to get connected to a group that is focused on creativity, growth, joy, and connection. And maybe for you that means art. Maybe you are into ceramics or writing like me or painting. Maybe it's something athletic. There can be a lot, I know there's a lot of volleyball leagues, but not like competitive dick volleyball leagues. You know what I mean? Like people who are just looking to be superior. I mean the people who just genuinely like coming together and hanging, and playing a game and connecting and learning and growing and getting better at their skills. I also encourage you to sit in circles with people if you can. So start a book club. That's another really good way to connect. Reading. There's so many beautiful books out there, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. If you like reading fantasy books, put some feelers out there. Ask people, maybe it's coworkers, maybe it's people at your religious organization or your neighbors, start a book club or see what book clubs are out there. And there's so many different things to read. You can connect over that. Start a cooking club, people who want to learn new recipes or just whatever it is. All of this is to say circles, sitting in circles, connecting with people over creative and joyful things that involve growth is the best way to break yourself out of trauma cycles. Because now I'm not sitting here thinking about all the negative feelings of stress and rage and sadness and sickness that are associated with the trauma I've endured from this evil person. I'm focused on how beautiful it was to hear my friend read about how the kind of life she would want to live if she was on the moon. She wrote this poem tonight at this writer's group about literally moving to the moon with someone who she loves. And it was super cute and fun. And I got to watch her read that with the setting sun and beautiful wildflowers in the background. I'm thinking about that. I was reminded that there are powerful forces of connection that can snap us out of even some of the worst traumas. And that there are powerful forces of connection and creativity, even in the midst of some of the bigger, more evil and discriminatory powers out there. And we always have the power to build the kind of world that we want to see. And it does start in our small circles. It absolutely does. And don't for a second think that the joy and peace that you experience in your small circle doesn't extend elsewhere. That's where that energy thing comes in. We as human beings are far more connected to each other than we realize. And in those rare moments where we sense that connection, where we feel the positive creative energy between us and someone else, we feel divine. We remember that we are a part of something bigger and we can make something bigger. So get involved. Find your circle. Sit in a circle. Do people the honor of giving them your full attention. Shut your phone off. Put it away. Look at someone. Listen. Listen to yourself. Just get connected. It's one of the best ways to pull yourself out of living nightmares. It's to remind you that those experiences, those people don't own you. That you can still connect to people who give you life. It gets you out of that defense mode, and into the creative mode. Because I firmly believe that as human beings, we were not meant to live in a survivalist mindset. I think the world has done that to us. But human beings create their best selves and their best work when they feel safe. We're all meant to feel safe. So let's create that safety for each other. Sit in a circle. Listen. Allow people to be vulnerable, because that vulnerability is where connection is too. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this, sinus infected speech. And I hope you're enjoying your summer. I'm doing my best to enjoy mine, as you can hear. And probably one of my favorite things about this summer is spending my time with you, which is why I'm kind of pushing through this sinus infection. So of course, the takeaways are, give yourself grace if you are caught in a trauma cycle, and get involved, somewhere away from it. Help your mind kind of disconnect from it. Connect with people who give you life. It gives you a lot of hope. And also continue to listen to this podcast, because you know that at the end, I'll always thank you for coming.